Bowers Game Corner presents Gencon Video Bonanza 2015. Brought to you by Gatekeeper Games, makers of The King's Armory, Thunder Track, the new sequel to Turbo Rally Kart Racing, and the generous support of our Kickstarter backers.
So welcome to the live Kickstarter advice panels. I thank you guys for coming. All right, my name is Wrot. I'm from Gatekeeper Games. So I'm going to be moderating today. So I'm going to be going through the questions. I'm going to be pulling them out to make sure that we get through all the questions. I'm going to announce the question. I'm going to direct it to whoever I think is most appropriate for answering it. We've got reviewers up here, board game publishers. Jamey, Stegmaier with his advice panels and things of that sort. You guys are certainly familiar with this stuff. That's probably why you're here. So I really appreciate you guys coming out today in order to experience this event. All right, don't be shy with your questions. If you have stuff about how to run a Kickstarter, we're here to get you from inception to the market. Okay, if you have any of those questions about, game design or what is it, what do you do, how do you get it into retail stores or any of that sort of stuff, any of those questions are welcome during this time. All right, they'll start with introductions. Down at the end, we have Forrest Bauer from Baka Forest Games, but most notably from Bauer's Game Corner Reviews. So he's our reviewer expert, so if you have any questions about reviews and things of that sort. And Forrest, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I've been reviewing for about 3 years now. I have a Kickstarter focus. I've done about 110 Kickstarter prototype reviews and previews, from nice artwork to crummy artwork. I also published a game myself, so I've seen a couple different aspects of Kickstarter. I've worked with various different people on helping their Kickstarter, and so I've seen a couple different angles from it. Awesome.
All right, next we have Jamey Stegmaier from Stegmaier Games. He's got his Kickstarter lessons and his Kickstarter advice blog. He posts on there, 2-3 times a week?
Mm-hmm.
2-3 times a week. Everything from direct advice and experience from what he's had to analyzation of what he sees in Kickstarters that he doesn't like, and what he thinks is good and great ideas. Jamey, if you could tell us a little bit more about what you do and what you bring to the table.
Yeah, so I run a small company called Stegmaier Games. I've run 6 Kickstarters to kickstart the first edition of a bunch of our games and products. And as John said, I write on a site, StegmaierGames.com. It's also KickstarterLessons.com. And I've written a book that's coming out in about a month that you guys can see in the little brochure on your chairs, just to help a variety of creators not make the same mistakes that I've made.
All right. Next, we have John Coveyou from Got Genius Games. He has the Kickstarter Statistics 101 advice on his thing. He's a genius.
He's a genius.
And now we've got him. Okay. So he takes statistics and does analytics on it. His games are about chemistry and things of that sort. So, the deep brains behind number crunching, the statistics behind what's the best day to launch, and analyzing all that sort of stuff. The information that he gets, he processes and spits out what's actually valid information that we could draw from it, and what's kind of bogus hearsay that we can get from it. Tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I design specifically science-themed games. I've been doing it for about 2 years now. I've got 4 games that are published, 3 that are my own designs. Linkage, Peptide, and Ion, all through Kickstarter. One that I helped develop with another company, Artana Games, Tessa vs. Edison. If some of you guys, it's here. If some of you guys want to demo it, and then I do the Kickstarter statistics. And with that, I heard a lot of stuff from other bloggers and a lot of questions about, is this better or is this better? And so I just went and grabbed the data from Kickstarter and tried to figure out if I could figure out it myself.
Awesome. All right, my name is John Wrot. I'm from Gatekeeper Games. I invented the King's Armory, world's first tower defense board game, which is a fun and exciting endeavor. I like talking about my family, so to tell you about that, I have an 8-month-old baby who's very proud to say that he's never missed a Gencon in his life. So I run the KSACs, that's Kickstarter Advice Columns. It's remotely similar to what these gentlemen do, but we all hit a different way of doing it, a different way of presenting it. Jamey's got information coming out all the time, and you can find a specific article that's going to give you help in a certain area. He's got statistics stuff that's going to help you analyze what works and what doesn't, and what's hearsay and what's not, and along those lines. I try to put everything, I try to put everything on one particular topic that you could possibly hope for in one ginormous, like 12-page long post. Like how to do pre-press. I have a whole huge, like 12-page guide about how to do pre-press or game components or something like that. How to get minis made, topics like that sort of thing. It's just boom, from beginning to end. So they're like really long reads. Some people are scared off because it's not, it's not bite-sized or whatever. It's these monstrous things, right? And all of us are here. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us when I say we're all here because we love the industry. We love people. We love board games. We love the fact that board games get people together, get people thinking, get people interacting with each other, it develops friendships, it gets you thinking, it gets your brain churning, you're doing strategy, you're doing creative things, you're building ions, awesome things like this, bringing people together, doing awesome stuff like that. And then from those of us who've been down the crowdfunding route, we wouldn't be here without you. This is your panel. This is happening because you love Kickstarter too, and you've probably backed one of our games or watched one of our videos. All right, so it's almost like we feel like it's our moral duty, right, to be able to give back to you guys. We love doing that. All right, so that's why we're here today. So this is our, as I said before, our second annual. We printed it on there. It's so much fun to say that. Right? Our second annual Vice Panels. We do have another one tomorrow, so it's in the guide. It's tomorrow at 2 p.m. You're welcome to join that as well. Because it's entirely Q&A based, it's not going to be the same thing. We have different panelists that are going to be with us tomorrow. I believe that Jamey and John are both going to be joining me again tomorrow. Joel Eddy will be joining us tomorrow, a reviewer from his drive-through reviews. So, and Adam Clark from KickTrack is supposed to be here too. I don't know if he got held up, but he's supposed to be on the panel also, so you should be showing up. Panda Game Manufacturing is going to be with us. So, so you're welcome to join us tomorrow also, if that's something you can do. It's not going to be here. They put our second thing down at Embassy Suites. So it's about a 5-minute walk from here. So hopefully it's nice weather tomorrow. All right, so let's get started with the questions. This is the one that's on the top, and I haven't a chance to go through them all. So let's just start here, right in the middle. All right, what are the best ways to raise awareness about your product? Okay, I'll say it again. What are the best ways to raise awareness about your product? Since Forrest is down on the end, and he's the answer to one of your questions. What are some great ways to raise awareness about your Kickstarter products?
Pre-launch, I'd say some of the best ways to raise. I mean, Jamey will probably hammer on this, but you want to have people excited about it before you launch. You want to be planning your launch out months and months in advance, getting that buzz. Put it on Board Game Geek, and you'll be surprised. Like just putting a game on Board Game Geek with a summary of the game, some people are going to be interested in it already just based on the categories you put it in. Get blogs lined up. Get reviews lined up weeks and months in advance. I get a lot of people who come to me a week in, and it's like, can you help me? And it's like, well, no, I can't do that. Because most reviewers that you send it to are going to have other Kickstarter games that they're also working on at the time. So you need to make sure you're lining up everything in advance, and that's all syncing together. That's my personal for just pre-launch. Just having everything set up and prepped and people already excited. Even if it's a small fan base already excited, they're going to spread. It's like a retweet. It goes from like 2 excited people to 6 to 8 to 12 to 15, and it grows like that. It's a snowball.
Follow up, and I'll direct this one at Jamey, and it's kind of on the same topic, but it's kind of like the next step in the process. How does a Kickstarter get noticed in a crowded field? How does a Kickstarter get noticed in a crowded, nicely done, in a crowded field?
Well, I tend to look at this from the perspective of a backer arriving at your project for the first time. There are certain things backers like to see when they get there for the first time. They like to see a funded project, which I know is a bit of a challenge. Like if you haven't funded yet, you can't automatically make it look funded so a backer can see that. But it is encouraging to a backer. So part of that is that you can keep your funding goal low enough so that when many backers get there for the first time, they do see a fully funded project. And they see a polished project. And a lot of that comes back to your relationship with the backers that are already there, the people who have already shown up and supported your project, interacting with them in ways that they can help you make sure your project looks as good as possible when someone arrives there for the first time. I do a lot of interaction with my backers just during the project. They're giving a lot of feedback. A lot of the backers want to, they kind of embrace the idea of being a part of the project. They want to make it better with you. You guys experience that?
Yeah, I'll completely agree with that. You can see it. Project creators who are actively involved in their things. You go to the thing. For me personally, I can only speak for me. When I go to a thing, one of the first things I look at is the number of updates and the number of comments. I look at the picture. The picture gets me there. All right, the picture gets me there. What is it? What's it about? What's the art? What's the style? So much that's said in that first picture. And then I look at the number of updates compared to how far into the project we are, and then the number of comments compared to how far into the project we are. If we're like 7 days into the project and there's like 20 comments, I'm not likely to back that project, right? Because just seeing somebody who's it's crowdfunding. It's crowdfunding. How do you stand apart? How do you stand apart? You get involved with your backers. You get involved with your backers. You stand out. You find new ways. You find something creative. Invent something that's brilliant, or do something that's already been done well, and try to do all of it. Right? It's hard to invent something. Well, you already invented your game that's brilliant, right? So just invent something else. It's, your little way of standing out. That's unique to you, right? Because you can't do the unique thing that somebody else did if that's not all of you, right? If that makes sense. All right.
Can I
yes, please.
So one of the, I would say, and I would ask myself two major questions. So outside of just my Kickstarter blogs and my publishing, I do a lot of consulting with entrepreneurs who are trying to launch products on Kickstarter. And so we always ask two questions, and that is, what type of person is most likely, and I'm going to use the word product instead of game, what type of person is most likely to want this product? And then number two, where are they already online? And then maybe even a follow-up question to that is, who is already speaking to this type of person? And if you can answer those questions, I think you're already a really long way. So maybe a couple of examples. Think about the theme, right? Is this a game about zombies, or is it a game about science? Now, if it's a game about science, specifically chemistry, like my games, what I'll do is I'll look for people who are interested in chemistry in some way, either a chemistry teacher, a parent who's teaching their kids chemistry, a college student who's in chemistry, or just chemistry clubs and groups, people who are fans of the topic. And then I'll find out where they are at online and who is speaking to them, what blogs, what videos, what lessons are speaking to them, and then see if I can plug in there. Because those people are much more likely to want your product, and you've already got people talking to them. So you're going to get the most impact from reaching out to those. So I think a lot of times we hear really vague advice, like you got to be pumping it out on Facebook, pumping it out on Twitter, and then you go, well, what does that mean? So I would ask myself those three questions and try and answer those.
Yeah, I want to agree completely with that. My game that I published was an adult party game. And when we shot our video, I flipped off the camera at the end. And we debated on putting that on there. And we also I went on like this little diatribe about, talking about an old high school teacher or something. And we ended up keeping it. And we got a couple negative reactions, but most people were like, that was when I knew that was the kind of humor that I'm looking for in this kind of game. The podcast we went to, we went to Guys, Games, and Beer, which, a podcast, obviously people will probably look for party games. And, so you got to know your market. I think that's a great point right there.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Then we're going to move on to the next question.
Because I totally agree with what these guys are saying. On my first project for a game called Viticulture, which is a game about winemaking, you're running a vineyard, I thought going into it that the audience would be split between gamers and wine lovers. And so I kind of took John's approach. I was like, okay, who's going to be interested in this? Gamers and wine lovers. But I kind of did a poll after the project was over to see who the people really were that were interested in it. And during the project, I targeted those two groups. I spent a lot of time targeting gamers, and I spent a lot of time targeting people who specifically love wine. And what I found was that it was only like 5% of backers were non-gamer wine lovers. There were maybe 25% of backers who were gamers who didn't really care about the theme, they just wanted a good game. And then there was like 55%, a big split in the middle. Some were just friends and family, that's the remaining percentage. But 55% were people who were wine lovers and game lovers. So sometimes you might need that intersection between the two, depending on what your product is. I think the biggest surprise to me was that the wine lovers, there were only 5% of those. So targeting trying to bring people into something new that they're completely unfamiliar with just didn't work for that particular product and may not work for other ones too.
Mm. Yeah. And this is funny, I'm going to add to it now too. Based on what you said, King's Armor is a tower defense board game. Somebody came up to our booth yesterday, and I wasn't speaking to somebody, I was speaking to they came up and they ended up speaking to one of my volunteers. And he goes, what is this? She goes, it's a tower defense board game. It's called the and he interrupts her and he goes, tower defense? I'll take everything. And we're like, okay. So sometimes things like, that 5% may have heard wine. Yeah. I don't even care about board games. This is cool. I'm going to support this genre. That's true. So, all right. So, what months and dates? What are months and dates not to start a campaign? Not double underlined. What months and dates are not to start a campaign? John, this is certainly yours.
I know it is. And, so I don't get attacked later. So before I even answer that question, I'm going to say a couple things about statistics. So a man much more wise than I, George Canning, said, I can prove anything by using statistics, except the truth. And another thing, a quote by Vin Scully, he said, statistics are used much like a drunk uses a lamppost, for support, not illumination. So, yeah, and I think they speak to part of the misinterpretation of what statistics is for. So my intention wasn't to go out there and harass people who were launching a campaign at a bad month. We're just going to we're going to call some months bad, even though I don't think that any month is actually bad, right? So a lot of people look at these, and I get criticized a lot because people say, well, you're giving advice and telling people that they should only launch on these months and they shouldn't launch at these times. And no, that's not it. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. What I wanted to do was I wanted to take all the data. I paid a programmer to write a bot and to scrape the Kickstarter website, pull all the information off of all of the projects, board game projects, up till that time. And then I classified them according to specific categories and put them in different groups using certain variables, like the time of the month they launched, the money they were looking to raise, the amount of backers they had, all these things. And at one time, in a previous life, I was a biostatistics major. I was getting my PhD in biostatistics at SLU, St. Louis University. I quit that to start my board game company. That was really wise. So I used SPSS, which is a pretty powerful statistics piece of software. And I wanted to figure out if there was a okay, now let me be really clear on how I say this. I wanted to figure out if there was a correlation between success rates, that's it, just whether projects fail or succeed, and the month they were launched. And according to SPSS, yes, there is an extremely strong correlation between the month that you launch and the success rate of those campaigns.
If I'm going to interrupt for a moment, he has this on one of your statistics things on your website, right?
Yes. You can find it. I mean, I think the question was, what month should I launch? Yeah, what month not to launch? And I can pull that up specifically because I've got a lot of blog stuff on there and I don't have everything memorized. So I'll pull that up. But so with that said, you've got to think about it this way. There are some months that look bad according to the stats or have lower success rates, not really because they launched that month, but because there was a whole lot of campaigns that launched that month, or maybe there was less campaigns that launched that month, or there's a lot of seasonal things that go into these statistics. So, and at the end of the day, this is a conversation that Jamey and I have had multiple times. If you have a really crappy campaign and you launch on a strong month, it doesn't mean you're going to succeed. And if you have a great campaign and you launch on a bad month, it doesn't mean you're going to fail. The quality of your campaign is what's going to carry you. So these stats really were just me playing around with something I was really interested in. With that said, I'll answer the question specifically. Okay, so months launched, there was a statistically significant difference in months July and August, launching in months July and August. And there was a statistical, and that was the success rates were much lower. And the success rates were much higher in January, February, and April. And that's for a launch. And for projects ending, it was August and September, and then December were bad months to launch. And the good months were February, March, and May. Now, if you overlap those months, if we take the first assumption I'm going to make is a project lasts 30 days, which according to Kickstarter is a valid assumption. They're on average about somewhere around 30 days. If we adjust both of these graphs by 30 days, what we see is that the good months, launching and ending, land on the same month. Right? The projects that launch on a good month and end on the same month, if we adjust, they're the exact same months, and those bad months end up being the exact same months, except for December. December is an anomaly, and that I think we can all reason why is because it's the holiday season. So, does anyone want to punch me in the face?
Mm-hmm. I'd like to throw something in there as well, and I think a lot of the reason is a lot of people that have done their research on Kickstarter know that you probably want to be able to launch your project and ship it by the end of the year, just for tax reasons alone. And obviously the July was probably because you don't want to do it during Gencon generally, unless of course you can promote it heavily at Gencon. Because that's what I did. We went to Gencon to promote our game, and that helped us a lot. But if you can't do that, then a lot of people are already spending a lot of money either on Amazon sales or being at Gencon or potentially at Origins when that is. And I feel like that's definitely going to have a conflict with that.
Yeah. Between convention season and holiday season, I mean, you got a family, you're taking your family to Disney World or Disneyland for, 2 weeks or whatever it is, you're dropping $3,000 on whatever that is. Sorry, I'm not back in Kickstarter in July or whatever. There's a number of correlations that you can make to those particular months, and then the holidays and things like that are happening.
One other thing I'll point out really quick is so July, there's more projects launched in July than any other month. And I think part of the reason is because if we look at the academic calendar, and this is me spouting off, so take it with a grain of salt. If you look at the academic calendar, we've got a lot of students who have ideas, who once April, May comes around, they're getting done with their semester, they've got a summer to work on their project, and then they just launch in July right before they've got to get back to school. We get a lot of downtime over the summer. So we see a larger rate of projects coming onto Kickstarter in July and even the summer months. And I think with that, you probably have a lot more novice project creators because they're just trying to pump out stuff and not really planning ahead of time. And so we probably see a lot of cruddier projects come on in July, hence the much lower success rate. So I think there's a lot of things that play into this, and it doesn't mean if you launch a great product in July, you're going to fail. We were hoping to launch in July, and we didn't anyway. So I don't even follow the stats advice.
All right. So next question, jumping completely somewhere else. What are some examples of successful stretch goals for tabletop RPGs? And I'll say it again. What are some examples of successful stretch goals for tabletop RPGs, role-playing games? To my knowledge, none of us have launched role-playing games, but I'll take a shot in the dark and say that just like anything else, because it's going to be the same for tabletop board games, straight up. One of the most reliable stretch goals that you can put in there that anybody's going to be excited about if they're interested in your project in the first place is quality upgrade. All right. So if you, and then that also allows you to have a lower starting funding goal. So if you plan your tabletop RPG and you're excited to put out these 4, 150-page hardcover books with metal casings on the corners and a reinforced spine and leather back, all right, you're going to have this massive funding goal that scares people away. Big numbers scare people away. But then when the big numbers happen later on, everybody gets excited, but they just don't want to see it at the beginning, right? So if you start with 2 books, and you make the magic thing, the companion that we're going to add later on, and you start with like paperback, and then we're upgrading, we're going to add this appendix to it, we're going to add this extra book, and then here's the psionic companion, and then if we hit $150,000 on our RPG, then we'll get the reinforced metal corners and all that sort of stuff. I would definitely say just like because I didn't see a similar question in here about board games, so I'm sure it's going to come up in your minds in the meantime. Is that component quality upgrades is a great way to do it. It's a great way to keep your funding goal lower in the beginning. There's nothing wrong with 1.5 millimeter punch board. If Catan can run the world on 1.5 millimeter punch board that warps and everybody goes, yeah, I love Catan, but my mouth corners are always bending. But then you just go and play it 4 minutes later. You don't really care. You're just taping it anyway, right? You can start with 1.5 millimeter punch board, and maybe one day you'll own half of Gencon also. All right? So, and then with stretch goals, then you can start doing the upgrades. You can pump it up to 2, and then maybe a little bit later say, hey, we're going to go all the way up to 3 millimeter or whatever it is. You can do that with any of your components.
It's not getting crazy.
You got
Yeah, but also keep in mind that going to 3 mil punch board, you might need a deeper box, and that's going to throw off a lot of your other stuff. So
yeah, you got to plan for it in advance. You need if you have a potential stretch goal, which is neat because Jamey's gone like the no stretch goal route.
Oh, I see stretch goals.
Yeah. But as far as like the component upgrades, you produce on your last game. Forgive me, on your last game.
Yeah.
You put it out there pretty much like 90% stretched.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you talk a little bit about that and why you did that?
Yeah. So John's referring to Between Two Cities, which I've kind of. So I've gotten carried away with stretch goals in the past, and it's a lot of fun, but they can also add a lot of cost. So like John gave the example for the RPG example of adding like the metal reinforced corners, and I'm sure if John ran it, he would budget in advance, and that's the key. Like if you budget in advance and you realize that adding those corners is going to add $5 per copy, that's a lot different than if it's going to add 50 cents per copy. So I've kind of tempered my stretch goals a little bit in preparation for that. But with like I have an upcoming project called Scythe, and for Scythe I'm already kind of planning the stretch goals for it, and I'm hoping to put out a core like retail version of the game that will be very solid. And then actually we're going to try something new with Scythe, so I'll mention that. I don't do Kickstarter exclusives because I don't want to exclude people who discover the game after like the 20-day period that I have it on Kickstarter. But I do promos. So with promos, the backers get it for whatever cost they paid on Kickstarter, and the promos are available after Kickstarter on Board Game Geek or through my website, but someone has to pay extra for them. So it is something special that you're getting as part of the project without having to pay anything extra if you're a backer, but you can still get it later if you weren't there up front. I think different creators have different philosophies on Kickstarter exclusives, but that's my personal philosophy. I don't want to exclude people.
I do.
That's why you like that.
you keep saying down because your battery's dead.
Stink. All right, after we get to the next question, I'll bring over a new battery.
Can I mention one thing on that too?
Yeah.
I do want to mention that when you contact a manufacturer, they all know about Kickstarter. And if you talk to them and say, what could we possibly upgrade on this components, they will think of things that you had not thought about as well. So highly recommend asking them, can we get a price for this versus this? And then if you have any suggestions on possibly how to upgrade, because they want your money. They want the money as well. They will give you cool upgrades that you can consider for stretch goals. That was one thing that we did with our game. And we were like, hey, can we get this card stock and this card stock? Because they're more than happy to quote you on just about anything you want. So that's something to keep in mind when you're talking to manufacturers.
So let's keep going in this direction. How do Kickstarters decide the extras at certain goals? And then what's a good division for payment, production, shipping, etc.? And I saw another one in here, don't remember the exact wording, but basically said, can you talk about budgeting? All right, so which is great. So let's talk about that. So for, if you guys don't mind, I'll start on this one, because I love the budgeting accounting side of things. All right, I love it. I love number crunching. So what you need to do is definitely what Forrest is talking about. You need to talk to your manufacturer, okay? We'll talk about, there's a question on here about how to find one. We'll get to that in a bit. You need to talk to your manufacturer about ideas. When we spoke with our manufacturer, we happened to manufacture with Panda, okay? When we manufactured with them, when I first went to them during our first campaign, which failed, and that's a story that we can get to in a bit about what to do with failing and whatnot. And rebooting. I went to them and I said, hey, this is what we want. And they came to me, and it was my first time. I was like total noob. And because that's where we all start. Okay, don't be afraid to be a total noob. You need to be, right? And then and then I went to them and our account manager was like, what if we didn't start with 3mm punch board? So, and they're going to give you ideas about how to scale it down, but why? Because they want your money. Okay? Because if you start with it too expensive, they know that you're not going to get there. Okay? And then they're going to end up, they're 100% your partners, whoever it is, whether you go with Wingo or LudoFact or whoever ends up being your thing. They're your partners the whole way through. Okay? They want you to be successful, so they're going to give you advice along that way. As far as how do you decide the stretch goals, how do you set those at different goals? You need to budget the crap out of everything. You cannot wing it. We've all seen, most of us have been burnt by the Kickstarters that all of a sudden don't have enough money to ship, or all of a sudden we ran out of money for production costs. Listen, if you run out of money for production costs, what in the world are you doing? If you run out of money during shipping and I'm like, ooh, 20% of the games can't afford to be shipped, that sucks, we'll work it out. But if you run out of money during production, you didn't even make it to the run out of money during shipping phase. You need to budget for all of it. You need to understand what every single cost is going to be, and you need to, I'll say it 1,000 times, you need to budget for it. And that's not like, hey, I thought about that. That's probably going to cost, right? There's no probably going to cost. There is what it is exactly going to cost. One thing that I learned from Jamey before I started, one of his great pieces of advice, and I now preach it too, is that if you can plan your game to fit inside of a medium flat rate box, you can do your own fulfillment, and you guarantee what your shipping costs are going to be. You can guarantee that your maximum shipping costs are going to be $12.65, and if you pay it online, it's like 11 something. You know exactly what it's going to be per game. Great. If you plan on doing your own fulfillment and you have add-ons that people can buy separately and they can fit inside the medium flat rate box, there's no extra charge for that. If you're not going to do your own fulfillment, then you need to talk to Amazon. But they don't talk to you. You need to read thousands of Amazon pages to figure out the one piece of information that you're actually looking for. So you need to get through. Is that still not running? Is it good?
It's clipping every like 5 minutes.
Do you mind chucking in the battery for me? Thanks, dude.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. Here you go. It's going to be on the bottom.
Nice throw.
Thank you.
Made sure someone admired that.
Thank you very much. It's not on film. So for budgeting, talk to everybody. If it's going to have a cost, you need to know what it is. Are you going to advertise? Talk to Chatty Boy from BGG and know what the rates are.
Yeah.
How much you're going to give. You're going to do the 800 to get the free impressions, or you're like 800 is too much to buy in. I'm going to start at 400. All right. Figure out if you're going to advertise on KickTrack or whoever. Figure that out. Talk to everybody that could possibly do your shipping fulfillment. Talk to the USPS. You're going to want to talk to Shipwire. You're going to want to talk to that local guy up the street. We just shipped our games with IntegriCore in Utah. Didn't I know who they were until 3 weeks before I needed that. Okay? Because we had planned other routes, and then chaos, crap hit the fan, and we end up having to go with another thing. And fortunately, we budgeted in some wiggle room for that sort of stuff. Right? Production costs, like Forrest said, you need to start way early, and you need to talk to your manufacturer, and you need to know, all right, what's the quote for like the cheapest, most basic 1.0 millimeter punch board or whatever it is. You do not need black core cards. You don't need it. It's nice, but like, who can tell? You can tell punch board, but who can tell the cards, right? But that's a nice thing to put on a stretch goal. So then I'm going to say, all right, can you quote me with these upgrades? Can you quote me with these upgrades? Can you quote me with these upgrades? And then you've got 4 levels, and you start picking the beat. I annoyed the crap out of Panda. Gosh, those people probably gave me at least 32 quotes. All right. They're not here, so I said that out loud. And the camera's off, right? So I was like, hey, I know, right? So I was like, hey, Fabian was my account manager. I was like, hey, Fabian, what's it going to cost for gray core? What's it going to cost for black core? What's it going to cost for blue core? Awesome. What's it going to cost for 1.5 millimeter? What's it going to cost for 2? What about 2.5? Do you have 2.5? Okay, what about 3.0? All right, and then I had each one, and I just annoyed the crap out of him with it, so that I had my base. And then I had this quote for this little upgrade, and this little upgrade, and this little upgrade, and I could shave the amounts off. I knew exactly what those amounts were going to cost. Okay, and then when I go to do my my Kickstarter goals, because I love stretch goals, I think that they're a lot of fun. All right, I have my main goal, and then I have the stretch goal list that you see, and each one's budgeted exactly. Like budgeted exactly. And by exactly, I do mean room for error exactly. Okay, you need room for error exactly, because if it can go wrong, if it can cost a little bit more, it's going to. It's going to. Oh, one more thing before I pass the question over to these guys, who anybody wants to follow up. On my Kickstarter advice columns on our website, I took my budget, which line items, everything in the universe. You can drop down, choose whether or not you're going to use Amazon fulfillment or yourself, and it's going to change your shipping rates and recalculate how much your add-ons are going to cost. A motherload spreadsheet for budgeting. And you can put in everything, your manufacturing quote, your shipping quote, what's it going to cost from Amazon. You got to punch in those numbers, what's it going to cost from Amazon, because depending on what it weighs, but then you can change it and bounce it all around and stuff like that. It's going to be a very useful tool. Do you guys have any tips about stretch goals and or budgeting? We get to talk about taxes next. We'll talk about taxes next. We'll do that later, right?
I'll take one. I know there's been a big movement against stretch goals. I've seen a lot of people who are very anti-stretch goals, and I feel they are incredibly beneficial. I know we had an $11,000 stretch goal, and we were sitting at like $10.50, $10.60. I mean, we were $300-400 away from our stretch goal with about an hour left. And somebody, one of the people that was really passionate about the project, came down like 2 minutes left and was like, you know, I'm going to drop $400 so everybody can get this. And you will have those backers who will want to see just that little extra stretch goal, no matter what it is, who are willing to just say, yeah, let's get that, let's make that happen for everybody, who'll be like, they'll be watching the Kickstarter, updating it as you are, like waiting to see if they can get it. They will be there with you. So I highly recommend to have numerous stretch goals, but reveal them not too many at a time. Like I see too many projects that's like, we have 15 stretch goals planned, and here they are. You got to unlock them. You got to unlock them. You got to be prepared for that, because as much as you think that no one's watching when it does hit, like say $6,000, and you should unveil a new stretch goal, there's people watching. There are people who are watching who aren't even backed who are watching. So yeah, stretch goals, I personally am a big fan of them.
I had a $90,000 stretch goal to add dice to the King's Armory. We're at $82,000 with about 3 hours left. We in about 4 hours. Wow. People threw in $8,000 more to add dice. And people love dice, and it's an awesome upgrade to a game, right? It's like it's a $90,000 stretch goal, right? But in 4 hours, we made $8,000 from people who were like, yeah, I guess I'll take 2 copies then. I'll take all the add-ons, whatever it's going to take to get this to happen. And then, because it was the last hour and we were still 3,000 away, and I was done with the stress from the 33 days of this nonsense. So I got down to the last hour and I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to sit in the comments and I'm just going to have fun with you guys. I already had the stretch goal unlocked image ready in case we made it. I posted it. I said, if we don't make the last $3,000, I'll cover it out of my personal wages for my personal job. I want to enjoy the last hour of the campaign. I put it up there. Within 20 minutes of putting it up, everybody was like, that's freaking awesome. And we made the last $3,000 in 20 minutes. Yeah.
So I would say there's 2 really big mistakes that I've found most common from project creators with stretch goals. And those are forgetting that shipping doesn't scale and not planning ahead of time for your stretch goals and then moving your production costs back. And so by forgetting that shipping doesn't scale, what I mean just really quickly is manufacturing costs scale. So when you produce a greater quantity, it lowers the cost. That lower cost per item. That lower cost can enable you to afford those stretch goals, the upgrades. Shipping does not work that way. Shipping, if you add a stretch goal, as a matter of fact, it might work the exact opposite. If you add a stretch goal and it adds weight to your game, you might actually increase your shipping cost. So that's something you need to take into consideration. And the way that most fulfillment companies in the U.S. go, internationally it's in kilograms, and so you've got to make the conversion. But in the U.S., it's usually always by pounds, and if you're under a pound, the breaking point is 13 ounces. So if your box, packaging, and game is under 13 ounces, you're using first-class shipping. Above that, you're using the 1 pound priority, up to 2 pounds. So you've got to take that into consideration, because if you are at 15.999999 ounces or 16.00001 ounces, literally, a piece of paper will increase your shipping cost by $2.50 or $3 almost. So you really got to be careful and take that into consideration. And if we're talking stretch goals, a few cards will easily push you over. Upgrading your punch board will easily push you over. So just make sure you've got wiggle room in there. And the manufacturer, one thing I did with Panda's great, Fajn actually, I asked him, can you give me a quote for the weight of this game? And he literally went and took the components and put them on a scale and said, we know almost exactly, within about 5%, what this is going to weigh. And if it's right at that breaking point, if it's like 15.5 ounces, don't risk it. You need to budget for a 2-pound shipping at that point. You try and you're in trouble if you try and.
Depends on what you're doing. Are you doing a big box game? King's Armor weighs 5 pounds. I went to the thing. I was like, can I ship this? First class or whatever. He was like, how much does it weigh? I was like, 5 pounds. He's like, oh goodness sake, here's a ream of flat rate boxes. So which is great. That's the glory of the make sure it fits in a flat rate box. You guarantee a cap on your shipping costs.
Right.
Okay.
First.
I wanted to mention one more thing about the shipping, which I know wasn't about the question, but stamps.com. Get just a 30-day trial subscription when you plan to ship, especially if you're just shipping, say, 500 to 1,500. You can get that 30-day subscription, and you can save hundreds to potentially even more dollars. You'll be surprised at how much that adds up. And you guys mentioned the medium flat rate ship box. Our game was small enough that we used a padded envelope, a flat rate padded envelope, so you don't even have to put in the padding. You can put a little bit extra, but there's $6 to ship each, and it really saves you a lot of money. Explore your options very thoroughly on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, if you have a card game, Hogger Logger just came out. I got Hogger Logger. It's like this big, right? It doesn't weigh anything. You put it in a flat rate envelope or a small flat rate box. You get the job done. All right.
Well, let me just say one more thing.
All right, and then we're going to go on to the next one. We got a lot of questions to go through.
If you do have a heavier game, I'll just mention this. If you do have a heavier game, the increase in shipping doesn't increase as quickly. With a smaller game, when you break those points, you're jumping pretty big jumps in your shipping costs. But with larger games, if you go from 4 to 5 pounds, the increase is not as damaging. So I just want to throw that.
That's good. Yeah. That's a great point. All right. How does Kickstarter? Thank you guys for coming. How does Kickstarter work? I think it says work with taxes, right? Okay. How does Kickstarter work with taxes? I'm going to give this mostly to Jamey because he's gotten further in the process than we are. He's probably paid taxes on viticulture and all that by now. I do know that Kickstarter is going to process your funds through Amazon, and then Amazon will eventually send you a 1099, which means we filed with the IRS that you've received money, and you are liable for taxes on it as income. The IRS does not care that it's crowdfunding and that they gave you money and it's a reward. The IRS says you sold a product online. Right, so you're going to have taxes on it. What's your experience been with? We're past the manufacturing phase, we're past the shipping phase, and now we're liable for taxes.
Sure. So I'm not an accountant, so I'm going to use some terms that I don't understand, but my accountant has told me. We use an accrual system of accounting, and John actually knows taxes really well, so you can correct anything I say here. But my understanding of it is that, so for example, I had a project last year. I had Tuscany. Tuscany shipped in December to a lot of backers. Tuscany was manufactured in 2014 as well, so it shipped and it got to backers in 2014 for many backers. And so what that meant, when it came to 2015, I had to pay taxes on every aspect of it. Let me try to get this right. I don't want to mislead you here, but I think the key is that you were charged on how much you spent to manufacture it and how much profit you made on it, all of your revenue, based on when people actually receive it. So if you manufacture something this year, 2015, but backers don't actually receive it until 2016, you won't be taxed for it until you pay 2016 taxes. Is that correct based on accrual?
The key word on everything that he said is accrual accounting. So talk to an accountant. You need to talk to an accountant. Hopefully you have a buddy in like the family or something in your gaming circle that knows accounting. You don't have to pay them $500 an hour. All right, but talk to them about accrual accounting. If you set up your business, when you set up your business, you pick one of the two methods of accounting. And accrual accounting means it's designed for manufacturers. They understand I got a crap ton of money. I'm going to have it for a long time. I have the money until the game's done being produced. And then when the game's done being produced, I pay for it. But I still have half the money for shipping. And then the game's finally at the fulfillment center, and now the game's going to ship. Now I finally paid everything, and what's left is a profit margin. So until you get to that point of shipping and receiving, the IRS is like, cool, we're not taxing you in this year. Let us know what the profits are going to end up being at the end of it. Because what you pay for manufacturing and all that, that's not income, it's not profit in that regard. They don't tax it the same way.
I do want to just give a quick shout out. Richard Bliss does a podcast called Funding the Dream. Absolutely outstanding Kickstarter podcast. They have an entire episode just devoted to taxes, which I listened to 3 times before I decided to launch. Absolutely, if you're interested in the tax aspect of it, they sit down with an accountant and he talks to them about it. I would recommend listening to that podcast.
What was the podcast called?
Funding the Dream by Richard Bliss.
Richard Bliss would be here with us today if he were in Indianapolis.
Yes.
He's like, yeah, but I can't make it.
He's got hundreds of episodes about tons of different topics. Outstanding stuff.
Jamey co-hosts with him sometimes. Plug. All right. What is the best way to find, so just jump off to a different direction. What is the best way to find someone to mass produce a game? So, in other words, how do we find a manufacturer?
There's actually another reference. Richard Bliss is a great reference. Another blogger who writes a lot about Kickstarter, especially in the tabletop space, is James Mathy of Minion Games.
Yes.
I think his website is jamesmathy.com, like M-A-T-H-E. And he has a great blog entry where he lists pretty much all manufacturers and what their minimum print run is and a couple other little stats. And that's definitely the best reference. I think we can speak to the people that we've worked with, but there's so many others out there. I only work with Panda because I really love working with Panda, but there are other good manufacturers out there, and they're on that list that James puts on online.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Yeah. My advice, and what I did and what worked for me, is I went through my game collection, and I found games that were quality enough for what I wanted to put out. And I said, all right, this one is a beauty. Who made it? And I went and I found out who manufactured it. And it happened to have been Panda. So I contacted Panda and I said, hey, can we work together? And right off the bat, we hit it off. So I happen to be working with Panda too. That's how I ended up choosing mine. So if you go look through your games, you're like, oh, this is crap. Right? Find out who manufactured it and cross it off James Mathy's list. All right, when you print it out. Let's see.
There's also a list on BGG. I don't know the name of the link, but there's a lot of lists on BGG.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources for that.
So check there for sure.
What level should you set the pledge? Should it be the minimum needed to launch or something higher? I'll say it again. What level should you set the pledge? Presumably for the core item. Should it be the minimum needed to launch or something higher? John, you like math as much as I do. What do you think?
Sure. Well, so the second part of that question actually makes me think they mean the funding goal. Did that person mean the funding goal, or are they referring to the funding goal?
Oh, okay.
Okay. There's 2 ways of going about this. So there's the low risk way and there's the high risk way. I'll explain what I did, and I think Jamey is maybe going to have a similar perspective, maybe different. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. That's nice. I mean, we're still friends.
It's good. It's different perspectives, man.
The low risk way is, essentially cover your costs. Do you have the money to pay for this game? If you need $20,000 and you put your funding goal at $15,000, do you have the extra $5,000 to pay if you don't actually hit 20? Right? So if you don't, then don't say you need $15,000, say you need $20,000, right? Put the amount you need. How do you find out how much you need? Take your minimum print run, add that to the shipping cost, that the total shipping that would cost you to ship out the minimum amount to get to that funding goal, right? So if you manufacture 1,500 games, it's going to cost you a certain amount, but you're not going to ship all of those 1,500 games. in order to have enough money to pay to print those 1,500 games. Excel spreadsheet, you plug in your numbers, you'll figure out what that number is, that break-even point. And then you've got to add in all of your other auxiliary costs. I couldn't sit here and list all of them. You need to go look at some blogs and figure out what they all are. You know, artwork. If you want to put in your time, I don't put in my time. There's a lot of things that go into that. Okay, so that's the low risk way. Now there's another way that I did it on my last campaign, which is a very high risk way, but I did it for a reason. It was a very specific reason. So my last game, Ion, I knew that I needed about $16,000. That was my break-even point to manufacture the game and ship it out to the exact number of people that would get me that funding goal, $16,000. And that's not including the artwork and everything else I'd already put in there. But I set my funding goal for $7,500. And here's the reason why I set my funding goal for that amount. I knew the size of my email list. I knew the size of my audience. I had already reached out to a bunch of media outlets. I knew the size of those media outlets. My whole goal from all that, I made some assumptions and figured that I could raise on day one, I could raise $7,500 from all the people that I was going to get to bring into my campaign on day one. If I can hit $7,500 in day one, I had a number of other media outlets who were going to cover me. And that was my pitch to them. We hit our funding goal in 24 hours. This is newsworthy. Had I not hit my funding goal in 24 hours, none of them would have covered me. I hit my funding goal in 24 hours. They covered me, and we blew way past $16,000 within a couple days. If I would have set my funding goal for $16,000, it's debatable whether I would have gotten even into the 20s. I did a very high-risk thing. I set it for much lower, but I knew I was going to hit my funding goal in 24 hours, and it was going to be newsworthy, and the campaign would hopefully get much, much bigger. Now, it was high risk. I did it only because I had the cash to fork up if that high-risk scenario, if I hit 8,000 and I needed 16, I had the money to pay to manufacture the game and ship it out to those backers. So I would never advise anyone to take that method if you don't have the money. And I hope Jamey's probably cringing behind me. No, I would never advise anyone to do that. But at that point, I already published a couple games, and we had a sum of money in our savings for the company account, and we knew we could afford that. And for me, it was high risk, but for me, I was either going to have a really large campaign or I was going to go and get another job. So it was
high but acceptable risk.
Right. It was high but acceptable. Right.
And that's something, I mean, you'll see the bigger companies do it. Like Queen Games is huge. They don't need Kickstarter at all, but they still go on Kickstarter 2 or 3 times a year, if not more. They put a game on there, and it's like a motherload big box game, and their funding goal is like $9,000. I'm like, will you freaking stop? What are you doing to us little people? Us little people actually need to raise all of the money, and then when I go on there with a goal of $36,000 because I don't have money to do it, and I throw out big box games, people are like, $36,000. Queen Games did it on 9, and I'm like, Queen Games is way bigger than me, dude. Right? So that's something that I've taken strides to fight against. Now, I'm not fighting against Queen Games. They're going to do what they're going to do, but I've taken strides to fight against this notion of, hey, you know, you only need this little bit of amount. I'm like, no, I've done everything I can.
Giant manufacturer.
Yeah, to present this information out there to say, no, you need lots of money. You need lots of money. All right, so let's move on to another one. What percentage, this question came up last year too, it's a great question. What percentage of the finished project do you need before launch? Whose question is this? You want to ask about? So what percentage of the finished project do you need before launch? Now, do you mean the project as in the project page, or do you mean the project as in if it's a game, what percentage of the game?
I do the graphic side of things, so I'm mostly I'm one of the last lines of before it gets shipped out to the printer. Mm-hmm. So I just want to be able to advise my clients on how much they need to have done.
Oh, okay. That's a great question. There's a couple different categories of it, right? There's how much art do you need before launching. That's going to affect your timelines, all right? You really only need, we launched the King's Armor with 20% or less of the final art when we launched, because we have a crap ton of art. We have like over 160 unique pieces of art in there. I couldn't afford all that up front. But that pushed my timeline back because that meant after I fund, I now need 6 months to get my artist to finish the artwork, right? And then there's the actual game itself. So I would say to your clients, 20. Honestly, if they don't mind a long timeline, it's 20% at the most. If they want to produce, kickstart, and ship all in the same year, then it's going to be much higher. Jamey, for Between Two Cities, what percentage were you at before you launched that? I know you had stretch goals for like upgrading art and things like that. What percentage would you say roughly?
Yeah, so here's the challenge. I think there are a couple of ways to do it. Like you can go with the way that John said, especially if maybe you're a first-time creator, you really don't know if it's going to fund or not, and maybe you don't have a lot of budget in advance. You need like a few marquee pieces of art to show people what the game's going to look like, and you should have some graphic design on it too to show people that you know how to hire a good graphic designer. If you're pretty confident that it's going to fund, if it's your third time on Kickstarter, your fourth time, and you have a built-up backer base, it's a very different circumstance. I would say it all comes down to your estimated delivery date, though. Like for me, for Between Two Cities, I wanted to deliver by November of this year, and so I knew that I had to, when we launched in, I think it was February or March, we had to have 98% of the game done. The art, the graphic design, almost everything was done before we launched the campaign. But the challenge I found by doing that, and I hope all of you will get to that point someday where you have the funds, the capability of completing almost everything before the project. The challenge is that one of the things I love about Kickstarter and the reasons I went to Kickstarter is that you can get a lot of great feedback about the product during the campaign itself. And so if you go into it 98, 99, even 100% done like Queen Games does, you lose a lot of that community building and that interaction and the potential for the product to get marginally better. Like you're not looking to design the game with Kickstarter backers, but backers have a lot of mechanics. Not mechanics, yeah, not the theme, not all that stuff, but to take a good game and make it great just by like little tweaks. That I've seen that happen, and on Between Two Cities it didn't happen because it was already done, and backers were constantly coming up with these neat ideas, and I had to say, we'll take note of that for the future, but we're not going to do that. This will affect the schedule if we do anything with that now. So there is some give and take there if you do have it almost all the way done. I don't know what you guys. How close was your game to finish when you launched? First,
I'm going to take it from the reviewer side. Yeah. Do not be scared to reach out to a reviewer when you only have 1 or 2 pieces of sample art or something like that, because any reviewer you talk to is going to focus on the mechanics. It doesn't matter about the artwork, especially if they're in the Kickstarter market, because they understand this is a prototype copy, and they know that. So I've had a lot of people who said, it's not ready yet. They're like, no, if it's mechanically ready, I can play it. It doesn't matter, and I can show this artwork, and that could be a teaser. But don't be scared to send it to a reviewer because you're worried that you only have 20, 40, 50% of the artwork done. Because a lot of times the artwork is something that you need to pay for. Definitely.
Yeah. And you're often hopefully sending to the reviewer well in advance of your launch. And so you might have a lot of artwork that's completing the month before you launch, but hopefully the reviewer already has it in hand, so you haven't had time to get that art through yet.
Yeah.
So follow up, and Jamey, I'll send this your way, because I think you'd have good advice on it. What eye-catching, follow up here, what eye-catching info, images, etc. should be on your page? Basically, if you're only going to have 5% of the art, what's a must?
Yeah, so I just did a poll about this the other day on my blog to see what people actually look at on the project page. And the poll results are still coming in, but one of the top images was the what's in the box image. Like, that image is extremely important because it gives you a brief shot, a visual of what's in the box. And sometimes I see on projects where that image is so long that you have to like scroll down the page to see it. I recommend having your graphic designer make it concise enough and condensed so that you can just look at one page and see everything in the box. And you want to almost overwhelm backers with that image. You want them to feel really excited about all the stuff that's going in the box. I would say by far that and the project image are probably the most important images on the page.
What would you recommend for the project image? What should that be?
Yeah, so I think I saw a study where for at least a board game campaign, having a 3D box hits the gamer hormones or juices. Like if the gamers love to see that 3D box on the project page. On my project images, I put that 3D box and I put all my friendly logo shipping. So if the project is EU friendly, I put a logo on there just so backers see. They don't have to search around on the page to see if the project is EU friendly. most of you, I'm guessing, are from the U.S., so you don't even have to worry about shipping. But for international backers, it's important for them to see that it's EU friendly. I have a Canada friendly and an Australia friendly logo that I put up there. And then I guess
those
the
are
one,
important.
Those are
really important.
Yeah.
It's not easy, especially EU friendly. It's not necessarily easy. It's getting easier though. Idea Dispatchers made it so much easier than Amazon did.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily easy, but it's absolutely worth it. Tariffs and VAT, value added tax, what they have in Canada and what they have in the EU is it's extremely cost prohibitive to backers. The mailman shows up at the door and says, "Write me a check or swipe your card for $40, or you're not getting your package. This is the import tax." You can prepay that for them, and it's not the $40. You pay on the manufacturing cost. They pay on the product cost. You can pay on the manufacturing cost that enters the country, and you factor that into all the math.
Two things there. One that I've recently done this, and I've seen this becoming quite prevalent, is Tabletop Simulator. A lot of people actually create their game in Tabletop Simulator, and I actually did I've seen a couple of videos recently, one from Greenbrier Games, very big company, had a huge line to their booth today, who did their new Kickstarter, and they had it on Tabletop Simulator, and I got to try it on there. So that's another way that you can potentially create your game without the components, and it still looks really, really good. So yeah, that's one thing to consider if you have the know-how on how to do that.
Any other project images that you guys would recommend?
It's actually an app on Steam, and it's like $15, but he completely recreated the new Zpocalypse 2, which is a lot of miniatures, a lot of stuff. He said it took him a couple days to plan it in there, but it looked, and that was the images he used on his website, and also a smaller one. I think he had like an $8,000 stretch goal for a solo game I did a review on. He recreated everything, playmat, cards, tokens on that, and he did his gameplay video as well, like a Rodney watch and play type video with that. And I was watching his comment sections. A lot of people backed him because they could see what it would look like, and that can drive a lot of people potentially to it.
Yeah. All right. So let's get towards the end of projects. All right. This one's a hot topic for me right now, so I kind of like the question. Is backer kit worth it? Is backer kit worth it? And we could put backer kit in brackets because there's like 9,000 crowd ops and all this one. Is backer kit worth it? I think every Kickstarter creator is going to have a different opinion on it. All right. Jamey and I don't use backer kit. Jamey uses strictly the Kickstarter surveys as they design it. I know people who swear by backer kit. I just had a backer for our Halvesies Dice project ream me out in the comments for not using backer kit, and she preached that she's backed over 1,000 games and over 1,000 Kickstarter projects, and more than half of them use backer kit. And I don't know why you're not doing that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But she's not on my side. On our side of the thing, where Jamey and I both look at backer kit and we go, wait, 1%? That's a huge number. No, thank you. I have the capability to do it myself, right? And that's something that it's something that the 1%. It depends on whether or not are you going to budget that in the beginning, or are you going to decide on that afterward? Because if you decide on that afterward, 1% of a $10,000 goal is $1,000. That's $1,000. Huh?
That's $100.
Of 10,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Sorry. Yeah, so
That's a really good.
yeah. So they take 1% for you. So they take 1% of your 1% of 100 is $1.
Yeah. You said 1% of 10,000. So.
Oh, did I say 10,000?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant 100,000. Sorry. Thank you. So I was like, no, man. My brain and my mouth are doing two different things. All right. So our recent dice campaign hit roughly $1,000. I'm going to edit that out. Our recent dice campaign reached $100,000. So 1% is $1,000 for us. And I'm like, no, I do myself. So it really depends on what you have. There are two resources that you're debating at the end of your campaign: your money and your time. How much is your time worth to you? If you have a full-time job and you have a wife and children and you're running around all the time, you got 1,000 things that you need to do, backer kit is worth it. Yes, backer kit is worth it. If you are a bachelor or a bachelorette, you've got all the time in the world, save your 1%. right? It depends on how much you want to manage your time versus your money. Jamey, what do you think? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, so I have a slightly different perspective because I do use Kickstarter's survey, but a couple months ago I was kind of debating, is this the best thing for backers? And that was the question I asked myself. What is the best thing for backers here? Even if it costs that 1%, which is annoying, but if this is the best thing for backers, I'll do it. And so I put a poll on my blog again to see what backers thought, and overwhelmingly what I found, and this may not be your experience, but overwhelmingly from other backers, I found that they do not prefer BackerKit or pledge managers. They're more comfortable with Kickstarter's built-in survey. So when I saw that, it was truly up in the air for me before I launched that poll. And once I saw it, I was like, all right, that's pretty. I'll probably launch that poll every year just to see if that changes over time. But as it stands right now, backers don't want it.
John, how do you manage?
So I'm going to be hypocritical. I do manage through Kickstarter's native survey. But so James Matthew, who we've talked about earlier, do you remember that? Did you read the blog he wrote on BackerKit?
Yeah, he had a poll too, didn't he? Yeah.
I think he did a financial study of it. Or it might not have been him, but what he looked at a number of project creators who use BackerKit, and they all said that they get roughly an additional. I think the number. Don't quote me on the number. You can find the article. An additional 7 to 10% revenue from BackerKit, because the reason you can add on things that you didn't add on last minute in the campaign. And so sometimes you just get people with the appealing images and, $5 more for the expansion or whatever it is. I'm already paying the shipping. And
it's been 2 months. I've got a couple paychecks.
Right. So that said, I think there is an argument to say that the 1% is worth it because you will gain that plus a lot more back. However, I still don't use BackerKit. I think the main reason is I'm just sort of like a rock. You've got to push me to get me to do something, and nothing's pushed me in that direction yet. And so maybe I will in the future, but right now, no. I just use the native survey, even though I know it might add value.
I've invented a third option. I went to, there's a survey site, there's called Poll Daddy and all those. There's one called emailmeform.com, and it's what I use for pledge management. It allows me to accept upgrades, but I don't have to pay 1%. It's $29.99 a month, and it's motherload survey options out the wazoo with payment integration. So you could use PayPal, you could use Google Wallet. There's a couple different payment integrations. So, and I will speak to the value of pledge management afterward. The King's Armory funded, the ending goal was $92,000. In pledge management, we made another $24,000 in pledge management. And it was a couple months. It was 3 or 4 months.
Changed my mind.
I'm just saying, right? So I know that when I was first considering it, which direction I wanted to go, I asked Sar Shai, who did the Agents, and recently did, what was this chess game called?
King Down.
King Down. Yeah. And I asked him, I was like, hey, I asked him this exact question. I said, hey, is BackerKit worth it? Did you make your money back on it? And he said, several times over. Period, said. That's all he wanted to say about it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to say what I made, but I will say it several times over. So it does pay for itself, but it pays for itself and then takes the 1% off of that. So you just got to figure that into, right? And then you're paying the Stripe fees and all that sort of stuff. But Kickstarter takes 10%. And then your pledge manager takes Stripe fees, which roughly ballpark, it's 3%. It might be a 2.75 or something.
Now I have a question. Have you done your half-seas dice? Have you seen the same? Because we actually just did an interview with a guy who did some drinking dice, and he was talking to me in an email, and he said he swore by it that he had so many people who came after the campaign, and he added on I think 5 to 10% as well on top of that after the campaign. So were the drinking dice? Were the half-seas dice as well?
Half-seas dice are currently in pledge management. And no, it's a smaller margin. If you decide to upgrade from the $1 print and play version to the $50 or $65 full game, obviously you're going to get larger numbers. And half-seas dice are $10 or whatever like that. So we've already made $6,000 or something in pledge management on the half-seas dice. So yeah, so it's a smaller percentage, but there's less necessarily that you could add on. All right, so we only have about 10 minutes left, so we're, let's kind of pump through a couple questions real fast, try to get them all done. So short answers. How much above operating costs should you put into your budget and launch goal to cover unforeseen costs and problems? John, 12-second answer.
That's really tough to answer. I mean, I would say at least 10%. Shipping, they're gonna lose some packages. You want to account for that. Yeah. Don't stick to that though. Do your analysis.
Yeah, do your analysis. I think I do 10%. For my shipping, I think I did like 7%, and on the games, I did like 10%. Because if you lose a big box game or it never shows up, it's going to cost you a little more.
What was that?
Shipping, I do a 7% overage. Because the variance is like John said, it's going to jump up. It's going to jump up from like 6 to 650. That's a big percentage per se, but it's 50 cents. You know what I mean? If you lose, this game at retail 72, if UPS loses that, I just have to replace it, and you have to replace it. If it's UPS's fault, you're the one supplying it, right? Jamey just talked about it before about how much money it costs when the shipping goes bad. It just costs an awful lot to replace that. So I did 10% on the manufacturing side. All right, how much of the game needs to be done to start a Kickstarter? I think we already addressed it. Jamey does about. I said 98. I say 92 to like 95%, somewhere in there. I like because it needs to absolutely work. It needs to be reviewer worthy. But I like having a little bit of room for people to say, we put our game out and during the Kickstarter, people are like, hey, what if you did this? Could you do that? What if this happened with this? And I was like, hey, that's freaking brilliant. Thank you. Let me adjust that. Oh my gosh, huge gaping hole in our system. Because when you send it out there, our games just went to backers last week. And there was a post on the thing. The guy said, oh, the graphic designs on this is amazing. The map tiles line up almost exactly. He's like, forgive me for saying almost because I pulled out a microscope. And I was like, within 3 days, somebody's pulling out microscopes to see how well your stuff aligns. You know what I mean? So it goes real fast. All right. Jamey Stegmaier, how do you get a big following?
How do I get a big following?
It's not addressed to you, but the question is how do you get a big following? I'm chucking it your way because you've got the biggest following here.
So when I was starting out, I had no following at all. Basically, it goes down to the answer John said earlier. I got involved in the community, I tried not to make it all about me. I think it could have been a major misstep for me to go on Board Game Geek, for example, early on, and try to only talk about my own stuff and talk about promoting my own stuff. I think it's a lot. People see you in a much better light if you go on and just interact and talk about the thing that you love, which is board games. So. Join the community, yeah.
Highly recommended. If you can get involved in any other sort of facet. Eduardo Baraf, a guy I do some videos for, he got involved in the community doing very 2 to 3 minute reviews, and he has seen so much booming just because he's interacting with reviewers and publishers and everybody else. If you can get interacting with everybody that you possibly can in the community, they'll send you a retweet, they'll follow you, they'll give you a recommendation, that sort of stuff, and all that stuff is worth your weight in gold.
I think the key there is to create your own platform in some way, whether it's a YouTube channel, a podcast, a blog. Have some way, even when you're out there on Board Game Geek, that if you've already written about something, or Ed can now go on and say, hey, I made a video about that, check it out if you want. People can come back to you, and you have a centralized place for them to go to.
Next question. What is the most unique, we'll each do like a 5-second version of this one, all right? What is the most, I know, what is the most unique pledge level that you've seen? What is the most unique pledge level that you've seen?
A campaign I just worked on called Thunderdome. He was creating a Nerf center in his backyard. For a $1 pledge, he was going to write your name on a Nerf arrow, and they were all going to be shot in his face and video recorded and put online.
So go on.
It was genius.
Jamey.
I don't know if I can beat that.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Most unique that you've seen.
Well, actually, I really love unique $1 levels. I think it's a neat way to get people into the campaign right away. And I think the Lanterns campaign did a cool one.
Oh, yeah, that was great.
Where everyone who backed at the $1 level got, I think, a lantern, kind of like a little floating lantern dedicated to them, and he pushed them off into a river all at once and videotaped it and showed it to backers. It's a little thing,
so
but
cool.
it was visually really cool.
It was very meaningful.
I'll give the cliche answer. Anything that allows people to get into your game in any way, shape, or form. Picture, we did text on the bottom of cards. People eat that kind of stuff up because they will specifically be like, I made that card, that's my picture. Anything like that, people adore that
When you're
kind of
putting the
stuff.
stuff in the game anyway, you're just making it with their flavor. You know, I want to sound a little like meh about it. I've seen a lot of pledge levels, and like a lot of it's hard to be unique at this point. So I'm going to say the most unique pledge level that I've seen, and this really isn't self-important, is the one that we put on our one recently on our Half Dice campaign. We put a pledge level up there. That was a St. Patrick's Day campaign because that was our game ran, or the dice ran during St. Patrick's Day, and the year before on St. Patrick's Day was when I found out that my son existed in my wife's womb. So we made one to honor my son. Awesome. That was cute. All right. What is the average cost to make a game? Board, card, etc. There is no answer. There is no answer to the question. Call Panda. All right. What keywords?
Actually, there is kind of an answer to that. Whenever you see a game, if you look at the MSRP, in general, the manufacturing cost is the manufacturing cost is 5 times. No, the MSRP is 5 times the manufacturing cost. So if a game costs $10 to make, in general, the MSRP will be close to $50. So you can undo the math. So if you have a game that will be exactly the same components as King's Armory, then you might want to market it around the King's Armory MSRP is at 72, 79.
Yeah, but even when we talk to people, they told us between 4 and 8 times.
Yeah,
depends on what it is.
there's a range.
So if
yeah.
you have a small card game, then you need to make it like 8 times because it might cost like $1.50 to produce, but your MSRP is going to need to be 15 in order to cover all your costs, et cetera, like that. So it depends on the size of the game too.
Yeah.
All right, what keywords to use or avoid? 12 seconds. Anybody want it?
Any racist things are bad. Anything like that.
Or sexist.
Yeah, sexist, racist, anything like that.
Yeah.
Which is hypocritical.
At one point, I put on there, I thought it was cute, I thought it was funny. We took our game out to a live demo or whatever, and one young lady made some nice comment about it, and I put it, playtester comments, and I wrote like, oh, a young lady, ooh la la, or something like that. Like, oh, a girl played her game too. And then we got, within like 20 seconds, we got like 9 bad press about it. And I was like, I just thought it was cute. Delete, right? So if you do anything that's just like even on the edge, or maybe somebody could be sensitive to it, even if you mean it in the best way, you could risk somebody taking.
Oh, can I get that?
Just be careful.
Do not try and reinvent the wheel. Do not tell people you are trying to reinvent the wheel. If you say, I have a revolutionary new game mechanic that's going to blow people's mind, they'll think you've only played Monopoly.
Yeah.
Do not go that route, ever.
How many backers should you have before launching a campaign? We kind of talked about that already. The answer is as many as you can get. Right, reach out to the reviewers, reach out to the other folks.
100 is a good number to shoot for. A lot of projects have seen 100. If you can get 100 backers early is vague. You're more likely to succeed. Less than 100, you're more likely to fail. But just.
Good. All right, this one was brought up late. Thank you so much for bringing up an extra question. How do you know how big of a print run to do? ? How do you decide budget if you don't know number of backers? So I will say with the print run, the answer is minimum, and that's going to depend on the manufacturer. Most of them have like a minimum around 1,500. Some do 1,000. Some do 2,000. Some will do less than 3,000.
If you're doing a card game, Ad Magic will do 500. We did 500, and the thing is, if you do 500 and you can get to 1,000, you can launch so many stretch goals. I don't know why I'm making it rain, but yes, if you can go, Ad Magic will do 500. They did games like Cards Against Humanity, so if it's a card game, they're all about the card games.
Oh, that's awesome.
But shop around.
Yeah, I think when you get a budget from, say, Panda, they'll give you your minimum 1,500, but you can also ask for them to budget the 5,000 or the 10,000, the bigger print run. So if you do end up having a ton of backers, you're prepared for that.
All right. How do you schedule, manage project timeline? What exactly do you mean by that? I recognize your card.
Essentially, like I'm still doing like the visual side of things, but like, do you have like calendars and timelines already posted? Like, what sort of software are you using? How are you managing your project within the greater scope of your business?
You have 12 seconds to answer the month-long timeline question. Go.
I personally, I just use an Excel spreadsheet where I've broken down every day of the campaign, the new exciting thing I'm going to announce on that
that's
day,
a great idea.
when I'm going to roughly do updates. So I just have it planned out day by day. That's just during the campaign and leading up to the campaign. So I start that spreadsheet 3 months in advance, and it ends a month after the campaign. So it's usually about a 5-month spreadsheet, day by day, what I need to do.
I like this. +1.
When should you stop making major changes and start focusing on getting people to fund/buy your game? Who's this from? Are they still here? You? Oh, him? All right. So what exactly do you mean by that? All right. When you stop making major changes and start focusing on getting people to fund/buy your game? Forrest?
This should be before you launch. This should all be, you should have every mechanic completely laid out. You should not be changing anything hugely fundamental. I should not be getting a new rule booklet 3 days later. This should all be pre-planned out when it comes to mechanics, gameplay, everything like that. Artwork, that's a different story.
Yeah, your playtester friends and your friendly local game stores open table night. That's for making changes. Forest Bauer is after the changes have been made. Lance Meister after the changes have been made. And Wrot runs through after changes have been made. Because their things are going on YouTube, and people who are watching those videos are expecting that to be the version that they get. Am I right?
Yes.
All right. Last question. RPG-wise, and we could cross this to a couple other ones too. We can answer different ones. Where are the best places to advertise? Best place to advertise for RPGs, and then we'll cover board games. It's our last question.
I don't know.
Yeah,
RPG.net, yeah, that's where I was going to go.
What's that?
Our RPG.net will be there.
Yeah, RPG.net, RPGgeek.com.
Yeah, all the
right.
and
where wherever there's heavy traffic on RPGs. You know, if you have your favorite RPG blogs, you have your favorite RPG whatevers, you're in the military and you own an RPG. I've always loved that one. All right.
Could I add one thing to that?
Please.
So I think one of the keys, though, with advertising, and it's great that people can have a small budget for advertising. It can really help. But the key, and this is what I've heard from Chad at Board Game Geek, when they click on that link, they don't find a beautiful project page, it doesn't matter at all that you've gotten them to click on that link. Yeah. So you really got to hone that, have a really beautiful, well-structured project page, send out that preview in advance to get people's opinions, to find all those typos, and that's the only way the ad is possibly going to be effective. And get a graphic designer to make a beautiful ad for you.
Well, and you can send it out to people in advance of launching.
With a preview page, yeah.
So people can preview, comment, etc.
The Kickstarters recently put a little bit of a monkey wrench in that plan, because when your ads now send them to the project page, it's no longer showing them your cover image. It's showing them the first 3 seconds of your video because of autoplay. So now, if they keep that, it's time for us to start thinking about how we start our videos. I'm going to start starting my videos with 2 seconds of the project image. So when people show up, it's still the first thing that they see, and then the video starts rolling.
Just one thing, kicktrack.com is a great place to advertise. Exponentially cheaper than BoardGameGeek.com. And one of our biggest day was actually in the middle of our campaign when we reached the hotness on Kicktrack. So it's a great site to consider asking them for an estimate.
Their skins are getting more and more expensive, but we paid for the skin, and the click-through rate on the skin, because they do like the whole background skin, the background skin click-through rate on that in 2 days was more than about a week and a half of BGG's ads, which is 2 days.
Well, you can skin it yourself, too.
Yeah. What's that?
You can do your own graphics to have.
Oh, yeah. You build your own skins for it. You're going to build all your own advertising. You're going to pay somebody too.
Where was that?
John, you had something?
Yeah, I want to say a
Track.
couple of things. One of the major tenets of some of the popular bloggers in the marketing sector, if you read them, is you have to have a product that people want to talk about. Number one, if you don't have that, like Jamey said, if they come to your page and they're not excited about it, then don't advertise. We don't advertise, and I'll tell you why we don't advertise. Because on our previous 2 campaigns, one article from one outlet brought in $55,000 in 24 hours, and another one brought in $36,000 in 24 hours. So we put our money and our attention into getting the big outlets to cover us.
There's another question here that says, what were those 2 outlets?
Yes, there was.
Yes, right here. You can't see it because it's written in special art.
Yeah. Scientific American and Gizmodo.
Oh, science.
Well, I'm making a chemistry game next.
Gizmodo just grab it from
Gizmodo does all things geeks. No, we pampered this blogger for quite a while, but it was worth every. I mean, it was an annual salary.
Detail.
It was an annual salary for one day. Yeah. I'm telling. So I'm right now writing, I learned a lot about reaching out to bloggers and media outlets, and I'm writing in a whole ebook on it right now that I should have finished by this time, but I don't, on just how to reach out to them properly, because we have found that just blows your campaign up. One article, I mean, it just blew our campaign up, a lot of the campaigns that I've worked with outside of this in the entrepreneur sector, who are getting the $250,000, $500,000 campaigns, they've got Mashables, Inc., Gizmodo all over their page because they're getting covered by these big outlets, and that's how they're raising their money. Now, he did it the hard way. He was building his audience organically for quite a while.
But part of that is the backers, though, or the bloggers. I think the key with building relationships with bloggers is that the first time you contact them, you should not be asking them to do something for you.
Absolutely.
The first time you contact them should be you telling them that they're awesome, and then
pampering.
Telling them why. Not specifically. And it's pampering, but it's also just building a friendship with a blogger whose work you love. And a couple months later, maybe they contact Forrest and ask him to do a video for your project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Making those connections is invaluable. Just solid gold.
And then the cool thing is, you end up friendly. If I may speak, with these gentlemen, I just met John today, and Forrest and I are a relatively new relationship in the last 2 or 3 months. And Jamey and I have known each other for a year and a half, and we started on his blog, and then we talked back and forth, and it was hey, advice on the King's Armory, and now I'm like, hey, buddy, do you want to come sit on the panels? Instead of Mr. Stegmaier, can you come? I would like to invite you. You know what I mean? Sort of thing. You end up making friendships with them because they're cool people who love the same stuff you do. That's why they do it. So we are at time, and there's a risk. We were going to hang around as long as they don't kick us out, but there's people waiting outside, and they've got everything booked up. So I want to thank everybody for coming. We are going to give you a round of applause for coming because you guys are amazing. All right. You make it possible. All right.
Bowers Game Corner presents Gencon Video Bonanza 2015. Brought to you by Gatekeeper Games, makers of the King's Armory, Thunder Track, the new sequel to Turbo Rally Card Racing, and the generosity of these great companies. They support us, go support them.